Nazi bitch.
Low A train.
In the peak of
He's trying to get in my ass!
Over there, pull out Adrian's cock and blow it.
And your little beaver edging in the back of your RAV4 in the car park but with a belt on.
This man is in no condition to fuck a sheep. You're just a cappybarnya.
Nobody fucks my son but me.
Suck your dick, please. I'll do
So The Boys ended roughly yesterday at the time of me filming this, and I think there's been a lot of talk around The Boys in general as it's ended, and I am here today to give you more of a rambling style video to talk about my thoughts and opinions on it. So I'm going to make this very informal, but I just want to talk about my thoughts and opinions on the ending of The Boys. I got a list of topics in general to rant off about on The Boys, and how, like, topics like people who are talking about the ending, and the people who really don't like it, and the people who are fine with it, and the pacing of the season, and such like that, and I want to talk about all of that in this video, and I'm just going to do it off the cuff. I'm planning to just do this no cuts and talk straight, so if you want to hear a guy ramble about The Boys, you clicked on the right video, because that's what I'm doing. With that being said, let's just start. Off the bat, I think it's worth talking about the pacing, because I think the pacing was the number one thing with the 5th season and the final season of The Boys that got the most criticism, and I think understandably so. The pacing of the last season wasn't great. There was definitely a problem with them spending, as I'll talk about, like, going in later with Soldier Boy. They spent a lot of time on setup plots, which seemed to be for the Soldier Boy spin-off show, which they probably didn't need to do. And it kind of did slow the season down a lot. And also I probably should preface this with a spoiler warning. I'm definitely going to spoil a lot of things in that. So if you are going, like, you haven't seen it and you are going in blind, and you haven't opened Instagram Reels and saw the ending of the series immediately, leave now, because I'm going to start talking about spoilers. With that being said, I think even something like Frenchie's death happening so late into the season feels like something that probably should have been much earlier, and wasn't, because we spent so much time doing kind of side quests. I think in that notion, though, I also kind of like that about Season 5, in a way where I don't think it was good for the conclusion, but I did like the slice of life element of, like, going to just, you know, spending some last time with these characters. And I do think a lot of the episodes, like the episode that was, like, each different character's perspective, I think it was episode 5, I might be wrong about that, though, and it was, like, Firecracker, Soldier Boy, Sister Sage had one, the Terror, I think, was the other one, and I think Black Noir was the last. I liked that episode, because I feel like it gave us some time to flesh out some characters who kind of needed it a bit, especially with stuff like Firecracker. I think that wasn't that bad. I think that was a good way to flesh out Firecracker and the new Black Noir and their plot lines. And I think the time we spent with Soldier Boy was fun, despite the pacing issues that it came with. So I feel like it was a double-edged sword. The easiest way that they could have fixed that is just not stuck to the 8-episode season format that they have for the full run of the show. If this season was like 10 to 12 episodes, I don't think there would have been a problem with it. I think the setup in itself is fine, and those episodes are good. It's just it kind of crushes towards the finale. All the stuff has to happen in the last few episodes, because we wanted to do, some last little adventures with the boys, and I don't dislike that. But I definitely see why it's the biggest major criticism online of the final season is the pacing. At least that's one of the major criticisms. I will talk about the others as we go, but I wanted to cover pacing first. Next, I want to briefly talk about the expectations, because I think the expectations going into this season was the reason also so many people I found were disappointed with the ending. And I think a part of that was the marketing. The marketing really hyped up the idea that we're going to go fully onto the scorched earth idea, not as like a metaphor, like I think it was intended to be, but as like a literal scorched earth, which is very different from the metaphorical scorched earth that I think they were going for. Which, yeah, I think the promotional definitely set up a very different finale and season from what people were expecting out of the final season. And I think that was a marketing problem mainly. But I think there's also a very large expectation for things to be very grand in the final season. And I think they did what they could with it. I think they definitely did that. But the gravitas, I think, that people wanted, just wasn't gonna be there for, like, the kind of show and budget they had. Now, I don't know how actual large the boys' budget is compared to, like, something like Invincible, but I imagine, like, they have to spend a good portion of it on the actors and such, but I think a lot of the boys, like, the final season, and the expectations were really high from the beginning, which was always going to put a lot of pressure on this finale, no matter how good or bad it was. And the pacing really didn't help that. And I think that's part of, like, the public view of the ending is really that expectation that the marketing set up for the final season and the pacing. I think those were, like, the biggest two contributors to the ending discourse. Well, talking about expectations, I think it's also important to note one thing they definitely did drop the ball with, which is Gen V. The Gen V cast just did not matter. I personally didn't watch the second season, so I wasn't too torn up about them not doing anything with Marie. I know that she was supposed to be apparently like a homelander level threat, but like, because I didn't watch the second season, because the first season didn't really do much for me. I thought it was okay. I wasn't, like, off the wall super excited for Gen V Season 2. Or, sorry, the Gen V Season 2 to affect the plot of the final season. But I do understand the problem with setting up Gen V, having 2 full seasons of it with the idea that it's going to be important, and then to just never do anything with it. That definitely is, like, one of the other criticisms I fully understand of the finale, is they literally just get Marie to get in a car and fuck off. That's all she does. She goes to Canada, and that's it. So, like, yeah, I kind of get that being a criticism. On the other hand, I'm glad they did keep the final story arc to being the main cast and the main characters, because that's the show that we kind of signed up for. And having the spin-off material be required to watching the main show, I feel like would have alienated audiences, even like me, who didn't watch the second season of Gen V. So I feel like it's also that kind of, like, tough area with how important did you want them to be, but also people watched 2 seasons of it, so they kind of expected more. So, but outside of Gen V, I already talked about the Soldier Boy stuff, so I'm actually going to skim over that, because I don't think there's much else to say. I did like the Soldier Boy stuff, though. I thought the Soldier Boy portion of the little mini-stories episode was my one of my favorite, I think, portions of the season. And Jensen Ackles really, I think, sells it. I think there's a reason it's such a fan favorite character, and I just like the stuff that was in there with Soldier Boy. I think the pacing really crammed it. Most of like Bombside also, I like his story. I thought it was actually kind of wholesome. I don't hugely hate Soldier Boy just giving the V to Homelander. I understand he ping-ponged constantly on his opinion of Homelander, but I think that makes sense. I think within Soldier Boy's character, it makes sense for that to be the case. There is something I do want to talk about with Soldier Boy, but I'm going to cover it when I get to Mother's Milk. But on the just general Soldier Boy and the setup for his own show stuff, I don't think that stuff was bad. I think for the most part, I actually enjoyed it. It wasn't too much one way or another, so I didn't mind that. Moving off of Soldier Boy, I would like to talk about the Frenchie and Kimiko stuff. I know another thing that people did not like about this season was Kimiko's quips, her shit talking. Which I kind of see that too. I think Kimiko's it's not perfect. It didn't really bother me as much as I think it did some people, but I like Kimiko and Frenchie's relationship through the season was alright. I think Silent Shit I think was one of the weaker seasons for Frenchie and Kimiko as characters, but I think Frenchie's send-off and death was handled pretty well. I think that there wasn't really gonna be a better way to, if we were gonna kill off Frenchie, to kill him off at the time. I think that was the best we could have gotten within the confines of the season. I also like Frenchie's last words towards Homelander. I like the "you never instill a day in your life." I think a good confrontation between the two of them. But Kimiko getting the Soldier Boy radiation upgrade in the final episode doesn't really bother me either. I think that actually makes sense. I think they just should have introduced it earlier in the season as an idea on how to beat Homelander, because it makes sense that they would consider that, because they already have considered it with Soldier Boy. But replicating it is also risky. I think it just should have been brought up earlier. If it was brought up earlier, honestly, I think that would have made sense as a core line of extra chance option for them to do. But I think it was fine. Again, I think a lot of these problems could have been resolved by just expanding the season by 2 episodes, so that the Kimiko stuff takes a little bit longer to get to. Moving off of that, Mother's Milk. So I was initially pretty okay with how was handled in the final season. I thought there was a lot of he had some good moments, when he talked to Starlight in the second to last episode, and his relationship with most of the cast, and he had some good funny moments. His weird reoccurring rivalry with Love Sausage was interesting to see come to a conclusion. But I think I didn't realize this until I saw after the boys online. They never address and Soldier Boy in the season. And I didn't really think about it, but they never really let those two have a resolution to their story. Soldier Boy just being put on ice, but also never confronts him. We never get a moment where he really, faces someone who was set up to be kind of his main antagonist, as a sense, in the way that Homelander was the main antagonist for Butcher, or A-Train with Hughie at the time. I think that they never finishing that is kind of a weird thing that I just didn't really think about at the time. But looking back on the season as a whole, it is kind of odd that we spent so much time with Soldier Boy and just never addressed at all, and his relationship with him. Otherwise, I like what they did with this season. I think he had a lot of fun moments. I like some of his scenes where he was just talking to other members of the boys. It was good stuff there. I just wish they actually covered this up with Soldier Boy. Because for so much time with Soldier Boy, not having him interact at all with is just weird. After I would like to talk about Hughie. I wrote down Hughie in my list of notes to talk about, but I honestly don't have much to say about him. I think his resolution at the end of the season with Butcher was handled pretty well, and Hughie getting a happy ending is nice and all, but Hughie didn't have much to do in this season. He was definitely still like a main character, but a lot of times outside of Hughie having ungodly plot armor and surviving stuff that's just like, sure, yeah, that makes sense. why wouldn't he survive that? Hughie's just general presence up until like the last portion of the finale almost felt like he wasn't there. Even though he was in almost every single episode, very rarely did I find Hughie having a plot line that really stuck out. He was kind of just the guy that they stick with someone else to develop them further. Hughie didn't really have much more to go through within this season. On a completely different note, Sister Sage was a interesting plotline to carry for so long. I don't really hugely hate Sage, but she definitely wasn't like my favorite plotline to follow. Her silly little blunder, big oopsie with Soldier Boy was also kind of odd. Like, with making her whole thing be just her intelligence, and then having her blunder right after Ashley told her that he's conflicted is a little bit dumb. It's a little bit but I don't know, for what she was, I think it's fine. I don't think there was really gonna be a like grand, super big Sister Sage like ending outcome anyway. I kind of saw her in the same vein as a character like Firecracker, where they just kind of needed to fill a member of the boys, so that, or not the boys, sorry, the Seven. So they put someone in there and wrote up a B or C plot with it. But it's just interesting to see how, for supposedly the world's smartest person, she kind of did flounder a lot of the season and kind of accomplished nothing. Someone else who didn't accomplish anything, but in a very different way, the Deep. I think the Deep's character arc this season and his descent fully was actually handled pretty well. It's kind of crazy how consistently well written of a villain I found the Deep was from the first season to the fifth. He never really gets better. I really like the fact that the Deep is, you could see he's always on the cusp of being, I think the best way I would put it is the Deep's like stance as a guy. He could be a good person. He has the potential that he could have been an actually decent person, but he's so obsessed with that spotlight, so obsessed with that limelight, that he's willing to do basically anything, and he lets it corrupt him constantly. And even when he was starting to get away from it, he let it drag him back into it, and he keeps crumbling further down and further down. And I think that descent into him being like basically a shell of himself, and him losing everything because of it, because he threw everything away constantly. I think there wasn't really a more fitting end than having both the ocean and the land refuse to accept the Deep. The Deep being rejected by everyone is the perfect way to let that man go, because he was objectively a terrible guy. He 100% got what he deserved. I do think it is kind of insane to say the Deep made it to the finale, but considering the way he went out, I actually don't really mind it. I think, also considering he ended up being like a backbone character, I think people don't talk about it as much as they really should, on how the Deep is kind of like secondary to Homelander. I'd say the poster child of the franchise. I think if you like, before you get into The Boys and you like watch it, the three characters you're most likely to see online and people talking about are memes of are Homelander, Soldier Boy, and the Deep. They're like the three poster children of the franchise, but I think the Deep is more so the poster child in like second place behind Homelander, because they always got that man doing stuff. They have the promotional videos and they'll release like the Deep Thoughts with the Deep to promote like the series as a whole. The Deep being such an interesting poster child and such a like kind of slimy scumbag, and the way he goes out being like fully denounced of that spotlight that he literally did anything for, I think was a good way to wrap up the Deep. On that note, also Starlight, since she kind of killed him, not directly, but Starlight was fine. Starlight's a character where I think, similar to Hughie, she was definitely around. She definitely did stuff in the final season. But I don't know. None of the Starlight plot points outside of her killing the Deep in the last episode and her conversation with MM in the second to last episode really stuck out to me. A lot of her moments didn't really hold my attention the same way a lot of the others did. I don't think there's a problem with that. These certain characters have to be the weaker plot points than others, but I just don't want Starlight kind of, for being such a key central force to the story as a whole, she was just kind of there for me. I know she definitely did stuff, but probably one of the more forgettable plot lines of the season. And to the last and most important two, though, I want to talk about Butcher. I love Butcher. Butcher is easily my favorite character from The Boys, and I think he is the best handled in the finale. His relationship with Ryan, who I actually, quick note on Ryan because I forgot to write him into the script. I forgot to write in Ryan, which kind of shows you how the show keeps forgetting about Ryan, because I felt like he just showed up as an afterthought twice in this season, and they kept forgetting he existed. It's kind of crazy how by the 5th season, Homelander's son, and most of the plot that originated from Ryan's existence. It's almost like Ryan is a nearly forgotten plot by the actual story. It's you have to remember that Homelander has a son. It's kind of a wild thing to happen. Again, 100% could be resolved with more episodes to fix the pacing. But digressing on that, Butcher's relationship with, when we do get moments with Ryan, I think it was good. I think the standout, though, was Homelander's fight with Butcher. I think the actual final fight between Butcher and Homelander, I think was handled well. I know some people really wanted them to, throw down and destroy a bunch of cities and such. And, yeah, Homelander's power scaling at that, final point was definitely inconsistent. But it was, I think, a fitting end to have Homelander, sniveling at Butcher's feet. I think that is the way that you had to take Butcher's ending, and I think Butcher's actual ending with Hughie and the way he went out is handled pretty good. I think Butcher being the way he is and dying the way he does isn't really a bad thing. I think it's very within character for him to not want to give up that life that he had, and that's all he's really known is that violence. So, I think him going down the way he did, where even though he's gone, people still cared about him at a point in time. There were still people to cry for him when he died, even though he thought of himself as a monster, even though he truly never was. He still had a heart. And I think that went pretty well. I think though I will say with Butcher, they do kind of just skim past the fact that he kills Victoria Newman in the end of season 4. They really don't care about that. But Butcher's actual role in the season and his dynamics with people, even his small moments with Terror, I think they gave Butcher some really human moments in this season, which I kind of like. And Butcher's ultimate revenge against Homelander, I think, was handled very well. On that note, of course, lastly, I want to talk about Homelander before I just talk about overall ending thoughts and the thoughts on the ending itself and such. Homelander's obviously great. I think there's a genuine argument for him being a top 5, maybe even top 2 superhero acting performance ever. And I'd honestly put him in my personal top 10 favorite acting performances. I think he's a real... Anthony Starr does such a good job as Homelander, and I think everyone knows that. It isn't a controversial take or anything, but he does so good in that role. And they really, I know people were talking about him being a caricature of his season 1 self, but I think it's almost more so that he was descended to that point. Homelander's the facade of Homelander is cracked and broken repeatedly until he's this kind of really, really insecure mess that wants to be revered as if he is a religious figure, like a god. And I think that's kind of how those people just are in real life. I think those people who have that little confidence in themselves and they want to be something, or it's like praised all the time, they do have that level of insecurity. They do have that, like, hollowness, that emptiness, that they'll do basically anything so long as they're still getting the attention. So I think Homelander descending as he crumbles and collapses his morals, not that he really had any in the first place, but like his facade of his morals falling apart, making him into this bigger monster. I think that's less of him becoming a caricature of himself and more him becoming more of a mess than he was. So I don't really agree with the general statement that Homelander became worse. I think that is just the progression of his character. I don't think that's seasonal rot. I really do think that's Homelander collapsing. And the audience feeling less scared of him because we, the audience, more often see him as he is. You know, the more pathetic man that he is deep down. But otherwise, I think Homelander was handled pretty much perfectly. Most of his fights this season were really cool. I think he did still have his tension to him. Again, definitely not like season 1. Season 1 and like the first few seasons of The Boys, Homelander felt like a Nemesis level like horror boss fight, you know? Like that, you didn't want to mess with that guy. But I think he still had his like atmosphere to him. You could tell there's a good chance pretty much anyone around Homelander could have died at any point if he just cracked in that moment. But I think overall they handled Homelander pretty well. I think his performance was great. And on that, I want to talk about the ending. I know I put it in the thumbnail. I kind of like the ending to The Boys. And it's not perfect. Again, they really did drop the ball on stuff with like the pacing. Soldier Boy just not being in the finale at all was kind of a blunder. They could have totally just had him there. He was still going back and forth on his loyalties to Homelander, so you could have had him either betray Homelander or just not being involved. He could have just fought MM, because I think MM just killed O-Father in the ending, and that's it. So, like, let Hughie get the full O-Father fight to himself, and let MM confront Soldier Boy. Have their, like, conclusion there. That's what I would have done, at least. And I didn't write this. I'm not going to say I think I could do it better. I definitely don't think I could. But I think that's what I would have changed, just so you include Soldier Boy in the ending. Because I think with having him be such a head focus of the season, not having that interaction in the finale kind of feels weird. Also, I'm pretty sure it was a scheduling conflict, but I would have been cool to see Maeve's at least reaction to Homelander stuff. And more of a like global reaction to the opinions of Supes as a whole, now that they saw what Homelander was. Because there should be more of a shift in the opinion of the Supes publicly than I think there was. Again, that could have just been fixed with like even an episode more runtime, so they have more time in the finale to like flesh that out. I don't mind the Deep's fight with Starlight. I actually kind of like that portion of the episode. I like the O-Father stuff. I know people talk about Homelander's scaling being inconsistent in that fight, but honestly, I don't think it really took away from the actual fight for me. The actual Billy Butcher versus Homelander fight, I think, was still very good. Butcher himself and his conclusion, as I just talked about, I really like. I like how that went out. I think most of the actual boys had a pretty good resolution, and I was pretty happy with it. I know it's not perfect. I know it's flawed. But I don't think The Boys was a perfect show to begin with. And I think it being flawed and being just an enjoyable watch is The Boys to me. So I was okay with that. But as a overall, I guess that was kind of my overall thoughts on The Boys. I really did I think The Boys is kind of a special show. I think as a cultural icon, it's been so ingrained in a lot of, like, people, like, quote The Boys constantly. The Boys is one of the most quotable shows, I think, ever. And I think it's going to go down as one of the most iconic shows ever, no matter what you think of the ending or the final season. I do think I would be surprised if you sat through, I think it's 28 minutes into this video now, and you haven't seen The Boys, but if you haven't, and you've listened to all of this, I would 100% recommend going to see it. It is a very good show, pretty much all the way through, at least to me. I know the ending is, people are split on it, but I think it was satisfying enough. And my end opinion on it really is it was a very good show with an okay ending. And sometimes an okay ending, it's alright. There's nothing wrong with it, you know? Not every ending has to be perfect. And I think as it is, as a total package, it's a very good watch. Overall, for me, I'd put the final season at like a flat 8 out of 10, because there wasn't an episode in the whole season I didn't enjoy. I think the whole season, pretty much, I liked every episode. And on that basis, I think I can't really give it lower. It was consistently good for me. Oh yeah, that was my grand rambling about The Boys. If you managed to sit through all of that, please consider liking the video or subscribing. It'd be very much appreciated. And I'm now going to play a clip of Seth Rogen dying. I will all see you later, hopefully. Goodbye.
No! No! That was diabolical!